talked about how even in your earliest experiences, you discovered that that sword, if it was valuable, was going to wind up on eBay. So are you disallowing that in this new version, and do you think that's possible, or are you more, tell me what you're doing?
I'm assuming these will still be on eBay. In fact, we have a group that just joined the game recently called the Britannian Mining Company that for 15 years has already been mining value out of Ultima Online. And they've just now set their sights on Shroud of the Avatar and said, hey, we'd like to come over here and start doing similar things. And as we had lots of discussions internally as to what we thought about that. And in the long run, we're going like, well, you know, the objects have real value. A virtual object that took time and effort for somebody to acquire, even in a game, has by definition value. And so there's really no way we can stop people from trading those for value wherever they want. And so, you know, as long as we allow in the game where somebody can walk up to somebody else and hand them their sword, well, that means that they could have made a side deal in Conversation or eBay or wherever else to have traded some cash or Bitcoins before handing that sword back and forth. So it is absolutely inevitable, and we do and will support it. The thing that can't happen in our case, you know, unlike a Bitcoin, which can travel from country to country, the sword in our case can never leave Shroud of the Avatar. And so that's the real difference. That's the lock that part of the economy, one half of the transaction, always must be inside of our world. So our gold coins and or our virtual swords can't really be used for, very effectively anyway for trade in the real world. But the reverse is not only possible, it is going to be very common, we hope and think, that people will use currencies from the real world in order to value the exchanges of these virtual goods.
Isn't there a danger in that? You've identified this correctly, but the thing that hops out at me on this is that if you restrict the supply within your ecosystem, within your economy of all of these different things, but the one thing that isn't constrained by you is the amount of outside value coming in, then doesn't that mean that if the game becomes wildly popular, that the prices of everything within the economy should go up? Oh, wait, but it's a self-balancing system, right?
Well, yeah. Well, don't forget, though, that the trade that happened from player to player is not value that ends up coming into the game. Because from the inside the game, all that happened was the sword went from player A to player B. So there was no delta in the value inside the game. The place where currency gets dumped into our game, you know, so if you think about, contrasting Bitcoins to our virtual world, if you take take the maximum number of Bitcoins the world will exist, and then if everyone had one Bitcoin each and suddenly twice as many people wanted one, the only way that would work is if we each now had half a Bitcoin each. And presumably those half a Bitcoins would be worth what the old Bitcoins used to be worth. In our world, day one, we might only have 100 people in the game. But then we're going to go to 1,000. Then we might go to 1 million. And so more like the early days of Bitcoin, where the rate of that rate of change is so high, we don't want to see a rapid inflation of the price. And so what we'll do in those early days is when new players join, we'll actually bring in new gold. And so that's why I actually said it's not a fully closed loop, because at least during a ramp up period, we'll be bringing gold value directly into the game to get it kind of off and running. But after it's up to a relatively steady state population, hopefully we won't need to have much more of that money policy. And again, the way I kind of relate that back to Bitcoins, as I look at Bitcoins, I think one of the brilliant parts of Bitcoins is that, you know, early coins were easy to mine, and late coins are harder to mine. And so no one will bother mining the later coins unless the price of the coin is high enough to bother needing to mine it. And so it has sort of a very elegantly self-balancing system that is what we're going to do manually. And again, it's because we're managing a different problem. We're managing a game, not a true currency. And so there are times when we might purposefully create inflation or deflation because I think it makes the game more fun. But you obviously don't want anybody doing that if you're talking about a real currency.
With regards to the games both that you've made in the past and that you are making now and that you think you'll make in the future, how do you feel about game companies sponsored real money trading? This has been kind of a contentious issue. And if you look at places like China, they actually don't allow it. The company is not allowed to make a market in their own goods, essentially, it has to be done by third parties. And that actually has created kind of a competitive market. But in the United States, that isn't really the case.
Yeah, it's a very complicated problem. And different companies are so far kind of falling in different sides of this issue. But let me see if I can at least frame our early opinion, almost as an industry, really, but how that is changing. Early on, before we realized we were creating virtual items with real value, what we thought we were selling to people was entertainment. We still fundamentally think we're selling people entertainment. You pay $50 or whatever the price of the game is, and now you can log on, and we hope you have fun while you're in the game. And that's all we were selling was entertainment. And then when people would start trading things back and forth between them, we'd be fascinated by it. But then, of course, the amount of money that began to be traded through places like eBay often is substantially greater than the amount of money traded directly with the company for that entertainment. And so the motivation is, well, gee, we should get a piece of that action. We would like to partake in that. The problem is that when you switch from selling entertainment, access to an entertainment service, to selling the sword, the virtual sword, you become a party to the safety and ownership of the sword. And in a virtual world, sort of like the real world, there are things like theft. And there's also glitches in the bugs in the product. And so if I had sold you a sword for, you play the game for $50, but I sold you a sword for, let's say, $1,000. And we, the company, were party to selling you that sword for $1,000. And once you had it, someone else in the game either stole it, or you were using the sword and it broke, or there was a glitch in the game and you lost your sword. Well, your beef is now going to be with us, not with whoever sold you the sword. And we didn't build these games to be in the banking business. We didn't build them to have the security of transactions to make sure that even the history of the sword's ownership was kept so perfectly that we could always make sure we got the correct sword back to the correct owner. And because it's a game, we actually sort of want people to be able to fight over the swords and steal the swords from each other and break them now and then more than they would in the real world, because it's a game. And we think that adds fun into the game. And so a lot of companies, most companies, in fact, have opted not to be the market maker in their own gold or in their own virtual items, mostly to avoid either needing to create the banking level of tracking of all those things, as well as, though, to not be the target of the potential lawsuits that might come up as people would argue about ownership or response of maintaining that virtual object. Now, the reason why that's changing slowly is because these games are just getting better at it, in the sense of we're gaining confidence over time in our ability to manage those mistakes, manage when an object is lost. We think we have data trails now to get the truth out. Did you give your sword away, or did you really sell it to somebody and now trying to claim it back because you're unhappy with the transaction? We think we have good enough data records to begin to have confidence we can at least not muck it up from our side. But there's still the side that says, we're making a game, and we want there to be able to be theft in the world at some deep level. And so if we are a party to selling $1,000 rare item that then someone else in the game steals from you, that's still one of the more challenging hurdles to get past before we would really fully adopt it.
So you said that you're making a game, and I agree with that. You are making a game, but these games that we're talking about, it's not like you're making the next iteration of Call of Duty. It's not like these are round-based. It's not like this is something that doesn't matter. These are actually things where people put in 10 hours continuously, not because they want to play a bunch of matches in a row, but because they're trying to accomplish something, and that does have value. So on the one hand, that kind of sets the stage for players who have more time than money to want to spend money on this. But you do have that other side of the equation too, where for a lot of people, this is a low level skill that they can kind of do, and in a way that adds value to other people, to other people's experience, earn an income from that. So what do you think of the idea of, or the practice, frankly, of people actually doing games professionally, playing games professionally and farming for other people? Do you think that that's a good thing or a bad thing, generally speaking?
So in the overall picture, I think it's a good thing. And so I think you framed it exactly correctly. And let me give you another little anecdote on the side of how this can go badly and how it can go well. You know, the bad side is what are often referred to in games these days as gold farmers. These are often sweatshop-like businesses that pop up in China. They either employ people at a very low wage or even create scripts and bots that perform repetitive action in the games in order to maximize gaining gold. And as those bots have become more sophisticated, they even will kill or block other real players from being able to have access to the places in the game that are the most valuable. That's the bad side, because it not only directly blocks other players from going into some of the most fun and most fruitful places to be, but it also means that these are people extracting value from the game, selling those things back to our players, and inflating our economy without us in order to suck some money out for themselves. And so while it's understandable why that happened, it's not good for our company. It's not good for our player base. It's not more fun for any people involved, et cetera. That's the bad side that we try to resist. The good side is more complicated because it's more like the real world. And as you said, people who, the time versus money paradigm and how you wish to choose your time and money is exactly it. The best examples I give is that in Ultima Online, we had people who would band together to put on a play. We'd actually put some theaters in the game, but we didn't really put any mechanics around the theaters. We just put them in there in case groups wanted to get together and perform a wedding amongst their friends or put on a play for their friends, etc. But the puppeteering wasn't very good, and you couldn't really charge people at the door, etc. But let's suppose in Shroud of the Avatar, as a case study, we make a much nicer theater. And if the theater, in this case, can be rented by a theater company or a playwright, and they can now give access to backstage to all of their actors and charge people a fee to come in the front door and sit in the seats to watch a play. Well, if they can do that, if they can charge money for a play and earn money on it, well, now they're going to want to put on a good play, because if they put on a really good play, people will come. And if they put on bad plays, people won't bother paying $1 at the door to come in and see that play. And since you don't want to go see a bad play yourself, you're going to want to know if that play is any good before you pay your $1. And that means it's probably worth it for you to go read a review of that play, which means the job of a reviewer of virtual plays suddenly becomes also valuable. And so what our goal is to create tools in the game to let people who are good at content creators to create content and get rewarded for that content in a way that does let them make a living at it. Because one of the things that we found out early on in virtual worlds is we, the company, which we number tens of people. Our tens of people cannot create content fast enough to even come close to staying in front of the rate of consumption of all the players in the world. And yet, if you don't give economic benefit to the people who do good work, and therefore, non-economic benefit to the people who do bad work, as in bad plays in my example, then most of the content that most people will create will be bad content. And so you need to give direct real-world reward to the people who go out of their way to spend time to add richness and depth into the virtual world, just like you do in the real world. And so that's why the monetary policy issues are exactly parallel. They're exactly the same foundational issues.
So that's, again, fascinating. The idea, again, of the reviewer job being suddenly relevant because there's something that needs to be reviewed that has an economic cost. Because you're right. I was just thinking to myself while you were talking about the play that I'm not sure that I would go to a play that, in a game that would be worth my time on a blind faith. But I might do it once or twice for novelty. But you're totally right. If there was a reviewer, if this was actually a community and it was something that people participated in, then that sort of changes the dynamic quite substantially.
Well, and in fact, we're even though the Shroud of the Avatar is still in progress, we're seeing this happen, right now in a way that we're trying to keep up with. It's happening faster than we can keep up with it yet again. For example, we need music in Shroud of the Avatar. And of course, we're doing this game with funds provided by the community. So it's on a much more modest budget than many of the games I've done in the past. And so anytime anybody can help us out in ways that are not monetary, we're happy to take that help too, because it saves us from having to spend the money we got from the others. And a lot of people, again, in our community have more time or more skill opportunities than money. And so a lot of people said, well, I would love to have, make my contribution to the game be, instead of money, give me some game credit if I can contribute some music. I was like, well, of course, we'd love that. So conceptually, it was an immediately good choice. But then what happened is that people, all kinds of people who were making their own music, put music up in a folder and send it to us in a variety of forms. And then for me, as the creative leader of the project, I sat back and said, well, wait a minute, 90% of this music being contributed is not exactly what I need for the game, because it's either modern or it's fully orchestrated, and I was looking for tavern music, whatever it might be. And I was thinking, now I have this way of, and of course some of the music just wasn't as good. I mean, so you have the full pantheon. People are just contributing music that they think is interesting and special, but it's not curated in the way that I need it for the game. And so I'm going like, well, now I've just given myself a huge problem of, compared to going out and hiring a composer that I know I like, which means most of the work I'll get back is what I'm hoping for. Now I've got lots of work coming in, but a lot of people have done a lot of work, but now it's going to take me a lot of work to even go figure it out. And so the community then jumped up and again said, well, just tell us what you're really looking for, and we'll build a little bard's circle and we'll self-curate. And so I said, great. And so I gave them feedback as the first few dozen pieces that came across my door. They started communicating amongst each other. They do their own pre-sort. And we're now to a point where the community gets it completely and has completely self-organized in order to create very high quality results, far better than I would have ever predicted we could get to at this stage. Basically every piece they're now putting up is a piece that I'm more than happy to drop directly into the game. And all those people, they're really doing it out of heart and passion, but now we sort of feel a reverse obligation. We're going to be giving them virtual advancement in the world because of their amazing contributions they've been making in kind, so to speak.
Sure. So, this takes me right to where I want to go with this conversation. So you did just do a successful Kickstarter. It actually wasn't that recent. It was last year, right?
It almost
it was
2 months from now it'll be a year. So, and in fact, we not only did a successful one, we did a very successful one in the sense of it was one of the top 5 or 10 of not only the year, but 5 or a dozen or so of all time.
Right. So, I saw that. You almost doubled your $1 million goal, as you said, which is more modest than a modern game budget in a lot of senses, but still was, a pretty decent amount to raise on Kickstarter at that point.
Exactly. And in fact, the community continues to grow and grow. We've tripled the number of people that are following us now. We're up to $3 million of backing at this stage. And in fact, each month that has gone by, the flow of revenue from backers has increased month to month to month. So we really just couldn't be happier.
One of the most interesting things for me about Bitcoin is that it's actually not the only cryptocurrency out there. It's one of the first cryptocurrencies out there, and it's the biggest right now, but it's not the only one. And one of the interesting things about it is that as an open source technology, it's something that anyone for any project can essentially create their own iteration of based on the most current version of the software or one of the other 3 or 4 software suites, one of the other 3 or 4 software technologies that are out there doing basically the same thing as Bitcoin now. One of the things that I've been doing with cryptocurrency for my particular project, and I think it's similar, so I would really like your opinion on this. Basically, with cryptocurrency, you are rewarding people through the initial distribution of the currency for whatever adds value to the network. So in the case of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a purely transactional network. So mining, in that case, processing transactions and making sure that they're not invalid, is adding as much value to the Bitcoin network as possible in a way that can be rewarded. You also add value to it by using it, of course, and also add value to it by accepting it. But the primary thing that's rewarded is the mining. With what I'm creating, we have essentially a content network. We release now 8 shows per week and lots of written content too. But it's been a mostly volunteer affair on my side. And so I kind of have a very similar problem to what you've had with your curation problem, right? You have all of this stuff and you need the community to self-organize in order to do that. But once you've done it, you need a way to feel like you can actually reward them, because you're not going to pay them real money. You don't have the budget for that. But yet they've put in work that is valuable to you and you have nothing that you can give them in return. So what we're doing is we've actually created a custom cryptocurrency that'll be launching the beginning of next month that we're going to, instead of giving it out through mining, we're actually going to give it out to content creators. And then we're going to accept it back in for advertising on our website and in our network and a variety of other things. So essentially, you start off with something that has no value, and then the people that create the value in it are the people who receive the currency first, in the same way that Bitcoin mining works. Does this make sense to you?
Totally. Yeah, no, and I think that as long as your ecosystem is sufficiently diverse, to go back to the gaming term, with faucets and drains, then this should work just fine. I mean, if I was a candle maker, I might not have a sufficiently deep and enough breadth within my ecosystem of clients and suppliers to make that work. So you have to have a sufficiently large pool. But the way you described it, I think, is just right. You have contributors who you want to give value to, and you want them to be able to cash out that value still within the same ecosystem of the universe you're creating. And as long as you've got this, the people contributing as volunteers are the people that you want to be able to support through advertising or other kinds of activities with your sites, then that makes a perfect match.
One of the interesting things that I think is different here is that in doing this, you do have to give up quite a bit of control. You can have some things because you can set value by saying, I'll accept my token at this rate, or, rely on the market. But you don't have the same sort of control in games that you wouldn't have the same sort of control as is desirable for you to have in games. What do you think of this idea as a way to fundraise in the future? Because this is, again, this is really where I'm going with this. You just raised about $2 million from 22,000 people. And if instead of giving those people, and obviously at the time this didn't exist, but if instead of giving those people back, here's your, $70 thing and you get a copy of the game and a signed thing, what if instead of that, you just gave them this currency that wasn't valuable for anything, but that they could choose to sell on the market if they wanted to, or they could choose to hold, knowing that later on when it's no longer available because your Kickstarter campaign ended, and at that point everything immediately becomes more valuable that you've done since it's no longer available broadly. Doesn't that mean that you see where I'm going with this? This is obviously too leading to be a question, but
yeah, no, I see the question in there. Yes, and had we had a better understanding of cryptocurrencies, we might have considered doing that from the get-go. We're sort of backing our way into that by giving out gold, which isn't a true cryptocurrency because it doesn't have a limit. It doesn't have a forced finite quantity. But it's not
tradable, right? You can't trade this before the game is launched.
You can't. Yes, at the moment you cannot trade gold before the game is launched. Although we now are finally trading pledges. So we literally just turned on this last cycle the ability for people to trade pledges. So we're sort of letting people trade these digital objects starting right now, even though the game is not finished. So we're sort of migrating in the direction you're describing. But there's something else you said too that I thought was very interesting about price setting. The thing to watch out for, I would imagine, in your case study that you've described for your own use of a custom cryptocurrency, is that since it's a closed ecosystem of exchange. I mean, even though people might take the currency, to the other side of the world or universe and back and hold it well outside of your ecosystem, if the primary trading value, if the primary use of the currency, not trading, but use of the currency, is still around your field of play or field of endeavor, then the thing to watch out for is price fixing. Because when you try to, the nice thing about buying, for example, advertising on Facebook or Twitter or many of these other digital advertising areas these days is it's all done as an auction. And so the price of that advertising self-manages and floats up and down based on demand. And so as long as you do that with yours, I think you're probably still in good shape. The problem is if you go, gee, I really think I need $10,000 for a page of advertising, and so therefore I need to somehow force people to pay that. Or if you realize, well, gee, I really want to my personal exchange rate of dollars to my own cryptocurrency, I need it to be some other higher number just to make it worth my time. Well, that might start to close off one of the places for people to spend your cryptocurrency because they think the price is wrong. They don't agree with you on the price. And so if you control, you could end up with a monopoly on too many of the pricing structures for their taste. So if you make sure you either do it as an auction or make sure that there's enough other people and there's enough other pieces, enough individuals that can't be monopolized that are in control of those pieces, then I think it should stay balanced just fine.
This is Chris Joseph bringing you news on Next, the first true second-generation cryptocurrency for February 21st, 2014. The Next community has begun fundraising campaigns to aid charitable organizations. Until February 27th, donations of Next are being accepted in support of Songs of Love, an organization that creates original, personalized songs for children facing tough medical, physical, or emotional challenges. In just a few days since the campaign was announced, more than 40,000 Next has been raised, and an anonymous donor has pledged to match all community donations to a maximum of 100,000 Next. At current market rates, this will provide Songs of Love with $12,000. To donate, visit songsoflove.org/next. For more information on Next, head to nextcrypto.org or mynxt.org. And stay tuned for more news on Next in the next Let's Talk Bitcoin broadcast.